Hello and welcome to Glendale Today. I'm Councilmember Manny Martinez and I represent the residents living in the northernmost area of Glendale in the Cholla District. Today we will be talking about the Glendale City Court, what they do, and why it is so important to all of us. My guest on today's show is Judge Elizabeth Finn, who serves as presiding judge for the Glendale City Court. Glendale is fortunate to have Judge Finn. Among her accomplishments during her 35 years on the bench, she recently received the prestigious Saguaro Lifetime Achievement Award from the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The award recognizes a person's lifetime dedication to ending domestic violence. Throughout her career, Judge Finn has devoted herself to improving judicial responses to domestic violence issues and collaborating with all levels of court stakeholders to reduce the impact of domestic violence in our communities. Welcome, Judge Finn, and thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, Judge Finn, let's start with a little history about the City Court. I recall in 2001 there was an operational review that resulted in the court being seized by the Arizona Supreme Court. I believe the Arizona Supreme Court managed our court operations for some time until you came on board. The latest operational review was performed in 2013 and the results were quite good. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, I can. Quite a difference. I mean, in 2001, when they did the operational review, the Supreme Court seized the court, which means they took the authority away from Glendale to operate the court and gave it to the presiding judge of the Superior Court. And that's when I was brought on board by the city. So we have the operational review in the 2013. The purpose of the operational reviews by the Supreme Court is to try to evoke consistency throughout courts, throughout the state, and also to make sure they're adhering to policies and procedures. And the kinds of things that were identified in our operational review were really what I would consider minor. For example, there were some forms they wanted to change. There are a number of things that are in the files, but they were not necessarily recorded in our case management system. They wanted those recorded in the case management system. Some of the things, like, let me give you one example in the financial area. We had an oral policy on what to do if you used manual receipts, which we almost never use. They wanted something in writing, so we had to create a manual receipt policy. So it was very reassuring to receive the results of the operational review, as well as the verbal comments that were very complimentary toward the court.
I can see the difference from way back in those years when we were having some very serious problems, and you've just done a magnificent job. Now, the Glendale City Court has a lot of responsibility for many different kinds of issues in Glendale. Could you please give us an overview of what the court does?
Yes, I can. The first thing you need to understand is the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. Felonies are something that are general jurisdiction your superior court's going to handle. So we only deal with misdemeanors in terms of our criminal jurisdiction. So our typical kinds of cases would be, for the criminal, would be, DUI, serious traffic, shoplift, theft, assaults, and then those cases that are categorized as domestic violence, like assaults, threatening, there's actually a number of crimes that fit within that. So that's the criminal component. The civil side really falls into kind of two areas, well, really three. We have civil traffic, so that's what most people think about if you get a speeding ticket or a stop sign violation, that kind of thing. We have city code enforcement, so if somebody's like parking a car in their front yard or an abandoned vehicle on a street, those kinds of things come to our court. And then the only other civil jurisdiction we have is on protective orders. And this is where a person can come in and under oath swear that something has occurred and that they're entitled to a protective order ordering the defendant to stay away from them or stay away from certain locations or people. The only felony jurisdiction we really have is search warrants, where we can't issue a search warrant. But when you think of, for example, got in a car accident, you want to sue somebody for money, that's a different court, okay? Or if you're a landlord and you want to have somebody evicted from the premises, that's a different court. We don't have jurisdiction.
But you have so many people coming through there that, I think about security. That is always a concern, particularly since 9/11. Can you talk about some of the security measures the court has in place?
Well, the first thing you'll notice is we do have an armed police officer right out front with security, okay? And you'll also see that he has monitors where we've got security cameras throughout the whole court, in the appropriate places, so that, for example, if somebody's in a courtroom and he sees arms going up and down, he kind of magically appears in the back of the courtroom to make sure there isn't an issue. We also have 3 security guards, and they screen everything coming into the court. So all of our mail, all of that is screened, in addition to they screen all of the people. And last year we had about 105,000 people come through our front doors.
That's a lot of people. Now, Judge Finn, I understand the court has found opportunities to develop several innovative programs, some that resulted in cost savings to the city. Can you tell us about some of those?
Well, some of the cost-saving programs that we've been able to do, for example, would be home detention. This is something that's authorized by the state legislature, and I'm going to take an example would be like a second offense DUI conviction. It's a mandatory 30 days in jail. You have to serve 20% of that in jail, which means you're going to serve that at Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. But the remainder of that, which would be 24 days, can be done on home detention. And because it can be done on home detention, and we started that in about '05, it actually has reduced the prisoner maintenance budget for the police department. So a lot of the things we do may not have an effect on the court, but they have an effect on departments citywide. We have community service programs that are really actually part of punishment for when somebody doesn't do something in their court or when they're supposed to do it, and that's benefited community partnerships. So we've been able to help them, maintain some of their facilities by ordering the defendants to perform this community service work at city facilities.
Well, that's great that we're able to help so many people with the addition of these specialty courts. I understand the court has been the recipient of some pretty outstanding grants. Can you tell us about some of those?
Yes, the Department of Justice, through the Violence Against Women Act, has grant opportunities, and we have applied and successfully received since '05 $1.5 million in domestic violence grants. And what's important about this is this money doesn't just come to the court. We have a domestic violence task force here in Glendale City government, and we look at the needs of the prosecutor, of the police, of advocates. So for example, our current grant pays for 2 full-time people in the police department, not the court, in the police department. One's a high lethality advocate who works on those more serious cases, and another one is a protective order coordinator who helps coordinate service among 11 cities at this point in time. And then we do have a nonprofit partner, A New Leaf, and that the grant funds a bilingual advocate at the court 5 days a week to help individuals with protective orders. And
Judge Finn, earlier you mentioned the court handles civil traffic violations. If someone is required to pay a fine, let's say a traffic fine, for example, is there an easy way for people to take care of those charges?
Oh, there are many ways. First of all, if you haven't been to defensive driving school in the last 2 years, as long as it really is minor traffic, so we're talking speed, stoplight, red light, a moving offense that would have points on your record, you can go to defensive driving school. You don't even have to come to court. And you do pay a fee there, but the charge is then dismissed, okay? But you can only go once every 2 years. If you want to pay your fine, you can do it in person, but you're having to go through security, you're having to park, go through all that process. You can actually call the pay by phone line, which is 623-930-2427, or you can go to the Glendale City Court website and you can pay online. We can do web payments. So we try to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Judge Finn, earlier we talked about the different types of civil cases the court handles. Can you tell us about what kind of criminal cases the city court handles?
Well, the criminal cases, I think some numbers might be important here. For last year, we had about 36,000 cases overall. 23,000 of those were traffic. About 1,400 of those were driving under the influence of alcohol. But what's more significant is 7,000 of those were criminal misdemeanors. So that means shoplift, theft, assault, trespass, and then all those cases that if you have a special relationship are designated as domestic violence. So we do have that volume of criminal cases, and they're much more expensive to process than a civil traffic case because you need a prosecutor, you frequently need a public defender, and then it takes more than 1 or 2 times to try to resolve those cases in court.
Yeah, I understand that in many of those cases that it is necessary to have language interpreters. You know, there's so many different languages. Can you tell us how this is accomplished and why is it necessary?
Well, first of all, it's mandated by all kinds of rules in the Constitution, et cetera, that it doesn't matter if you're a witness or a defendant, we have to provide an interpreter. So in terms of Spanish language, we have 1.5 full-time interpreters. I have about 16 staff that are paid bilingual pay. And then in terms of if I'm short a Spanish interpreter, we'll use Language Line or something like that, which is an agency that we can call on the phone and then get an interpreter on right away. And then we also have the responsibility, obviously, for lesser used languages. And so far this year, we've provided interpreters for 22 lesser used languages. A couple of ones that you might not expect would be Dinka and Loma.
Dinka, where did that come from?
I wish I could answer that. I need to look it up. But there is a Dinka population that has resettled here in Glendale.
Oh, I didn't know that. It seems the court is always looking for additional ways to demonstrate fiscal and judicial responsibility. What are some of the other activities the court has undertaken in recent years?
Well, our specialty courts certainly have kind of fit into that. So, for example, if you're convicted of an act of domestic violence, you're ordered to report to our treatment court, and we monitor your counseling. But when you don't do what you're supposed to do, we're going to order you to do community service at some entity that benefits the city of Glendale. So that would be one way. The home detention certainly does, and then we've started our mental health court. And in terms of the mental health court, if you're in custody, what we're trying to do is get you, instead of leaving you at MCSO in custody while you're getting stable, which could be 4 weeks of incarceration costs for Glendale detention, we're trying to get you out with your case manager and get you stable in the community. And when we started the mental health court, we didn't even consider that an indirect benefit would be we've reduced the prisoner maintenance budget for detention.
That's very, very interesting. Now we're going to take a short break. Then when we return, we're going to take a closer look inside the city court. You won't want to miss this. Stay tuned.
So let's put her at the top of the docket. 13 pages of criminal history record and no new crimes since she's been in the program. Talk about a success.
Crime victims in Arizona have rights.
A right to be treated with fairness, respect, and dignity.
To be free from intimidation and harassment throughout the criminal justice process.
To speak with the prosecutor about how the crime impacted you.
To be present at any criminal proceeding.
The right to a speedy trial.
To be informed when the suspect is released.
To be heard at sentencing.
To receive prompt restitution.
To have your property returned.
To have someone exercise your rights if you are unable to do so.
If you or someone you love has been a victim of crime,
the Glendale Police Department Victim Assistance Unit can help.
Contact us at 623-930-3030.
Welcome back to Glendale Today. I'm Councilmember Manny Martinez, and my guest today is Judge Elizabeth Finn. Recently, I had the opportunity to get an inside look at the Glendale City Court with Judge Finn. Let's take a look at that now. Judge Finn, what court are we in here?
We're actually in courtroom 4, and we're about ready to start staffing for mental health court. That he doesn't think he has a substance abuse issue because he has a medical marijuana card. Still? Okay.
You know, I know we've talked about mental health staffing before. It's a new program, is it not?
It is fairly new. We started it January 22nd of last year, but actually the planning took much longer than that. We started in 2012 in terms of trying to plan for it, trying to identify, did we need it, what did it take to be able to deploy it. Okay, I know that you're not his case manager, but I have some real questions with the report. It said
Could you explain exactly what happens in the mental health court? How do you determine or identify individuals that get into mental health program?
Well, right now, we've limited it to defendants who have a seriously mentally ill designation. So this is a designation that's been given to them by a medical individual. If they have that designation, we're able to go through our county mental health provider to verify that, and then that means that they are placed in the mental health court. So do we still want them doing taros 3 times a week and the individual counseling 1 time a week? But now the way that it works is that Magellan, which is Mercy's taking over for them as of April 1st, has a contract with the state to provide mental health services for individuals within the county.
He's working right now, and he also goes to job training.
They contract the case managers, and those case managers will send reports to our court advocate.
Okay, a lot of stuff going on. I would say let's start just once a week.
Okay.
Get them in there.
Activities.
Get the door
Once,
open.
and that advocate then sends me all the progress reports on how people are doing within the last 2 or 4 weeks.
With the residential staff yesterday, I went by
Okay.
to do a home visit, and they report.
I then do staffing where I meet with each case manager about each defendant before court starts. And then I'm going to require her to meet with advocate at court. I won't say domestic violence just because I don't know if he's going to see this or not. So, and then we go into court and I issue a judicial order, which is a contract between myself and the defendant saying, these are the things you need to do by the next court date. The goal here is we don't care if somebody's not guilty or guilty of the offense. This is unlike any other court really in the criminal justice system. We're focused on the defendant and connecting the defendant with resources available in the community to help them become stable, to know who to call if they're getting crisis, try to get them to the point where they're not going to reoffend and commit a new criminal offense. Okay. So let's put her at the top of the docket. 13 pages of criminal history record and no new crimes since she's been in the program. Talk about a success.
And how do you evaluate the success of the program or the results of those individuals that go through the program?
What we're looking at is somebody has at least been stable for 6 months.
Okay.
What that means is I have some people that have been with me for a year now, where they were stable, then something happened. Maybe they had some kind of episode where they ended up in the hospital, or they committed a new criminal offense, or maybe they'd stopped drinking and now they're drinking again. So, we'll restart with them, trying to get them, again, connected with the resources in the community so that they can become stable and stay stable.
That sounds like an excellent program, and I know I've heard some very good things about it.
Initially, we started it because there was going to be a financial increase in the psychiatric budget that's in my court budget. It was going to go from $15,000 a year to $35,000 a year. And when someone is deemed not able to assist in own defense by superior court, the only thing that happens is the charges in my court are dismissed. There are no services with it. So the person's not connected with the resources in the community. They may reoffend and commit new criminal offenses. And so part of it initially was financially driven, that we wanted to be able to not spend money just to have charges dismissed, but use court time and court resources to help connect these defendants with the resources available to them in the community. Is he still fully adherent?
Yes.
He's at the top of the docket after the graduates. He is absolutely one of our stars today. That was one of the best reports. Obviously, as we've gone on, we feel like we're changing people's lives. We're changing people. There are failures, but there are also successes. We've had 32 graduates to date, and we think that's really exciting.
That sounds great. A question I have in general, I guess, for anyone that comes to the court. Say I get a speeding ticket and I show up in court. I watch TV sometimes about court cases, and there's certain rights that have to be explained. What happens exactly on that?
Well, there's a real difference between a civil speeding ticket and a criminal charge. If it's a civil speeding ticket, I'm going to say you're charged with speed, you've been to school in the last 2 years, you get a ticket dismissed. If you have been, it's going to be doing a plead not guilty and have a trial, or guilty and pay a fine. That's it. But if you're charged with a criminal offense, even if it's dog at large, I have to go through a regular criminal guilty plea proceeding. So I have to tell you the minimums, the maximums for the charge. I have to tell you consequences of immigration, that there may be some. I have to give you all of your constitutional rights. I have to find there's a basis that exists for accepting your plea, as well as that that I'm making a finding that you voluntarily, intelligently, and knowingly know what is occurring as I'm taking the plea. That's all before I get to sentencing you. So people are really surprised sometimes because they expect when they come in on a criminal charge it to be the same process as if you were here on a traffic ticket. And total different rules govern. Judges are required to do totally different things with those two situations.
Now, some of those individuals that appear in court, not all of them speak English. So you have some bilingual staff.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Well, in terms of Spanish, I have 16 staff that are paid bilingual pay that can do kind of conversational Spanish. I have 1.5 full-time Spanish interpreters. But above and beyond that, again, this is in my budget, I have to provide interpreters for lesser used languages. And so far this fiscal year, we have provided interpreters for 22 lesser used languages. And some of these are not normal ones that you would think of, like Nur, Dinka. I mean, these are, not languages that you hear in your everyday going about the world. Somebody comes in with the Dinka, for example. What's the process? You have to call someone and to get them on the phone? How does it work? It depends. There's two ways we can get an interpreter for a lesser used language. We can use a service that contracts with interpreters nationwide, and then we do it over a speakerphone, or we have a list of interpreters who do interpreting for courts, because this is really specialized language. We're talking legalese, who will come into court, and obviously there's a minimum rate for them to come into court, and then they're paid for how much time they actually spend. So for example, I had a judge out, and I did 3 protective order hearings last Friday with a Haitian Creole interpreter. It took us over 2 hours, which is long for a protective order hearing. But it was what was considered consecutive as opposed to simultaneous interpreting. If I have a Spanish interpreter come in, they listen and interpret at the same time. So I just keep going with my regular dialogue. But if I have an interpreter with a lesser used language, I have to say something, wait for them to interpret, get the response back, and then say it to me, and then I can ask my next question. So it takes a lot longer with a lesser used language interpreter.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to go over that mental health program, especially. It's very interesting, and it sounds like it's been very, very successful.
We're really excited about it. We're very proud of it. The initial reason may have been financial, but what I think is significant is we're changing people's lives. We're helping people save their lives.
That was a very interesting visit, and it's just amazing how much preparation is done for the mental health court hearings. Judge Finn, now let's talk about something that is near to your heart. You have been a lifelong advocate on domestic violence issues. Can you talk a little bit about what constitutes domestic violence?
Sure. Usually you think of it in terms of an intimate relationship, between two people, whether they live together, they're in a romantic sexual relationship, married now or in the past. But Arizona statute is actually broader than that. It can cover brothers and sisters, etc. But what we're talking about is someone who, for a victim, is emotionally disturbing them. It could be physical violence. It could be stalking them. So what domestic violence is it takes a category of crimes that already exist in Arizona law and says if you have a certain relationship, it's then a domestic violence, for example, assault, as opposed to a regular assault. And what that means is that you're going to be mandatorily required, if you're convicted, to complete a minimum of 6 months worth of counseling, and that's by state law.
Wow.
Okay. And I think what's significant here when we're talking about domestic violence is how pervasive it is throughout the United States as well as in our community. The statistics show that there are about 1 million, and I'm going to say women because it is still predominantly a crime against women, who are affected by domestic violence. It occurs in about 20% of the dating relationships. The predictions are that every 1 in 3 women will experience an act of domestic violence in their lifetime. And I think that the scariest statistic is what it does to the children. And that is that the estimates show that it occurs in front of over 3 million children a year.
If a person is in danger, what other things can they do to protect themselves?
Well, obviously one is called 911, but individuals in a domestic violence situation are not always ready to make that change. So one of the things that's always recommended is a safety plan, and that would be, like, where are you going to go? Is there a neighbor? Is there a relative, someone you can go? Are there some belongings you can leave there and basic items that you would need if you have to leave quickly? Is there a code word that you can use with your children or with your neighbors to let them know, hey, this is a time when you need to leave the house, or this is a time when I need help? The other thing would be is that, it's so easy for us to try to put ourselves in the place of the victim and say, why doesn't she leave? Well, the most dangerous time for a victim is when the abuser realizes he no longer has that control and that she's going to leave. So whether it's she's left, she filed for divorce, she's requested a protective order, has been served, it's when he loses that control that's the most dangerous time. So we cannot substitute our judgment for that of the victim. The victim has to be in a position where they feel it's safe for them to leave at that point.
Thank you. Your commitment and dedication to ending, or at least reducing the impact of domestic violence is really commendable. I want to thank Judge Finn again for being my guest today. I really appreciate your taking the time. The Glendale City Court and all they do is so very important to all of us. I hope this program has helped you to become familiar with the type of issues the court handles and how the process works. For more information on the Glendale City Court, please visit glendaleaz.com/court or call 623-930-2400. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Glendale Today.